All right, fellow coders, welcome to this next installment in our series of videos where we're going to be diving into building a web app from scratch, focusing on a React front end and a Java Spring Boot backend with a relational database. Sort of the next step in our process is to dive into the actual outlining of the nouns from our requirements document. So if you haven't seen the video where I outlined what this requirements document is, you probably want to go back one video to watch that. There should be a playlist associated with this video. You can just hop back and watch that. If you've already seen it, then hey, there we go. So what I've done is I've taken the requirements document in front of us and I have outlined all of the nouns in yellow. So I've highlighted all of the nouns. There are some nouns that I did not highlight because I know that they are not going to be useful. Something like application, the word application is just too broad. It's, we're building an application. We don't need to have an object for this. And dashboard, although it's a noun, this represents a view. It represents a page that has a bunch of stuff on it. So these, specifically what we're doing here is we're trying to find the Java objects, not like HTML views at this point. So that's why, something like dashboard was not highlighted because I just know it's not going to be a Java object. If that makes sense. So anything that's like a view, like that would be an HTML page, we do not highlight. So what you'll see is things like student, assignments, assignment, status, assignment, student, GitHubUrl, branch. So all these are nouns, which is, person, place, or thing. Thing being the real word here, where it's like, this could be an object in the real world. Branch, like a branch of a tree. A URL is an actual thing. It's something you type into an address bar. An assignment could be a thing that you hand in. A student is a person, a thing, if you will. So you see, I've gone and highlighted all of the nouns. Sometimes people might get confused and they might highlight verbs. Do not highlight verbs, okay? I sometimes will see the word like something, for example, like submit. Submit, if you think about it on its own, you might be confused and think that that is a noun, but it's not, because submit is kind of part of a verb, like submitting or submitted or whatever. If you can put an ing on it, then it's probably not a noun. So yeah, we've gone through and we have outlined everything. Little things that I will note is that there's something like an email notification here is highlighted as a noun. Later, I call it just notification. So these are little intricacies where you need to understand that email notification and notification mean the same thing. Okay, it's the same noun, the same object that we're dealing with here. Just like assignments with an apostrophe S, or where is it? Assignment without an apostrophe S, or assignments as a plural somewhere. There'll be assignments with an S on it somewhere, potentially. Here you go, assignments with an S. All those are the same thing. It just means an assignment. It is a single thing. So pluralizing it or adding apostrophes to it doesn't change the fact that it's the same thing. Same with like code reviewer or code reviewers with an S. So code reviewer, or somewhere there's a, code reviewers, right? So those will represent the same thing. So what do? Once we have all of these nouns highlighted, we scan through them, and one by one we can start to decide, is this noun going to be a full object, a full class, or is it going to be a property of a class? Okay, so if it's a full class, great. If it's a property of a class, it means it satisfies the has a relationship. So a student, let me think. Or let's do assignment. An assignment has a status, right? What is the status of the assignment? The assignment status is pending submission. The assignment's status is submitted. The assignment's status is in review, needs update, and completed, right? So an assignment has a status. What that means is status is probably going to be a property of an assignment object, okay? Which probably means that assignment is a class, most likely. So there's going to be some liberties I'm going to take here with respect to trying to be as what's the word I'm looking for? brevity. I'm trying to use brevity. I'm trying to be quick as possible here. So in the interest of saving you time, I'm going to skip a lot of the heavy duty detailed descriptions of everything here as I go, and hopefully you'll get the gist of it as we go through this process. So the first one that we have here is student. Okay, so you might want to write that down in, write it down on a piece of paper, or write it down somewhere where you can start to keep track of, is this a class? Is this a property of a class? Is this part of a relationship between two classes? What's going on? So I would just probably pull up something like Notepad myself, so I'll open that up. Okay, so here's Notepad. I'll just write down student. Typically, you do not want to make it plural, okay? So the convention is to keep it singular. So student, assignment is the next one. Assignment, status, assignment, student. I have that already. GitHub URL, branch, right? GitHub URL branch, status, student assignment, email notification, which we could probably just call notification. I'm trying to decide. Anyway, we'll put down email notification. Code reviewer. Reviewer, right? Code reviewers. I just took out the S. Code review. Oops. Reviewer. So, and then here, review looks like it's a different noun, but really what is meant by review is the code review. So the code review is the thing that we are referring to when we say the review. I really should have typed in the code review to be explicit, right? So those are the little intricacies that you need to understand when you're going through the document and understanding what they meant if they choose a different word, a different noun to describe the thing in question. So assignment, status, code review. Oops, I highlighted previous instead of status. I meant to highlight status, not previous. Let's say no color. Previous is not a noun. Okay, code reviewer code. We've sort of hit all of these, right? Status, notification, student, assignment, boom. Student, assignment, GitHubUrl, branch, code reviewer, notification. All these are captured. Here's URL. So what does this mean? What do we mean by URL here? This is a URL for a video recording. So interesting, video recording, right? Let me open this up. Video recording. And this is the URL of the video recording. So video recording URL. That's what that is. Notification, student status, cohort. Okay, cohort is a batch of students. There's an API. Now, API on its own is not helpful. You need to know what kind of API. So what did I mean by an API? We need to have an API that allows for an admin role to create user accounts. So this is like some sort of a user accounts API, right? So like a user account API. Okay. This is probably just going to be a user account service or user service, but anyway. I'll just use that terminology. Cohort students, admin role. Oops. Admin role and user accounts. Now, what's interesting here is when you say user accounts, you're really just referring to users, right? And I don't know if we've captured the word user in here. Like a student would be a user, and a code reviewer would be a user. So anyway, user is actually the object that we care about here. Code reviewers, reviews, students, assignments. Okay, cool. So that's sort of the process that I go through, right? Is let's go through that process. Let's grab all of our different nouns. And now the next step is let's go through these nouns and try to figure out, to the best of our knowledge, which one should be an entire class that contains properties and which one should just be a property of another class. Okay. Now again, this just comes with practice for me. I can't fully put my finger on how to describe that. I just know that these things are classes. I wish I had a really good, there's probably a great way to identify, is this a class or is it a property of a class type thing? Like, should this be a full object or not? But anyway, I just know a student is probably going to be a class because a student is a type of user, which is going to be a class. right? But really, student is actually probably going to be the role for a user, okay? And then there's going to be an admin user that's a different role as well. And then there's going to probably be a code reviewer role. So all of these different users of the application, a student will be able to log into the app, so they're a user. A code reviewer will be able to log into the app to review other people's code. They're going to be a user. And then there's potentially this admin person who can log in, and they will have more, universal rights inside of and privileges inside of the app. So there's probably going to be an admin type of user. But really, all of these three types of people, types of objects here, could either be defined as classes, or they could just be roles within the user class. So this is really a design choice. And to be simple, we're going to have a user that has a role, and the role can be student role, code reviewer role, or an admin role. Okay? Boom. So that captures student. So sorry, I put class here, but then I realized really the user is the class. Again, the student could be a class. Student could be a class that is a subtype of user. That is absolutely an okay design. And this is where the complexities of coding come from, and it's where the overwhelm comes from, and it's where the hitting a brick wall and stopping in your tracks and going, well, what do I do? There's like 7 different answers that I could go forward with, right? So, and this is where beginners get caught up in the little details. So, in my, I don't know if this is great advice. My advice is don't just be paralyzed with choices. Do your best, pick one and go with it. If you pick one and go with it and realize later that it's probably causing you more pain than you think you should have to deal with, then maybe, yeah, you can switch and try to choose one of the other potential solutions that might be a better fit. At the very beginning here now, just looking at this text in front of me, I think that this is probably going to be fine. I probably don't need to have a separate student class. I can probably handle all this with roles. And again, this comes with 15 years of experience building apps, and just knowing that typically there is a user class. That's the global type of object that the all-encompassing object for anyone who wants to log into the app. And typically a user has a role associated with it. This role is a property, and it can be one of these different roles, different types of roles. Okay, so that means that we've handled student. That means that we've handled code reviewer, potentially. Code reviewer. And that means we've handled this admin person as well. Okay, and we've moved user class up to the top. Boom. So that helps to, thin the herd a little bit with respect to all these all these nouns. Now, assignment, probably going to be a class. Again, I could change my mind. Maybe choose that this is going to be a property or something later. We'll see. But I think an assignment is going to be a class. And like I said, status is probably part of an assignment. It's a property of the assignment. What is the current status of the assignment, right? And I guess I can, give the values, the different status values here. Okay. Let me make this a little bigger so we can see all of the statuses. Okay. GitHub URL. Well, a GitHub URL, what is this? Is this its own thing? Is it going to be an entire object on its own? If it is, I guess what I would ask is, what would I store inside of this? If this was a class, what would I store inside of this object? Maybe I would store the branch inside of it, but is a branch directly related to a URL? I don't know. Maybe you can make an argument for that, but here's what I think. I don't think a GitHub URL is going to be a class. I think it's going to be a property of assignment, because an assignment is what has a GitHub URL, right? The GitHub URL represents the URL that points to the code that is being submitted here, right? So it's going to be, a GitHub URL is going to be the property, and the branch can be a property of an assignment as well, right? I think. That's my thought right now, is those are both properties of a class. Okay, email notification. Typically, this is actually probably going to be like a service. There would be like an email notification service that does stuff. Would it make sense to have an actual email notification class? If so, if we had an email notification class, what would belong inside of this class, right? What would we have in it? Would we have anything here? Well, maybe the video recording URL would go along with the email notification. The status could go along with the email notification. There are some things here that what is the actual body of the email notification? So we could make this a class potentially. The question here is, would we need to store this information? Because that's typically what I'm looking at right now is storing it. An assignment would belong as a table in a database. We'd want to store the assignment and the status and update it and blah, blah, blah. For an email notification, do we need to store this object in the database? Again, this is a design choice. Do we want to do this? Do you want to store all the notifications that have ever been sent so that we can go back and look at them? Maybe. I mean, maybe you want a notification history, like a log of notifications or something. This one's really, it's up to your business analyst. As I said in the last video, these are the questions that you would ask clarification on. You would say to your business analyst, okay, so for these email notifications, do we want to like keep a record of them so that we can look back on them and see the history of them, a log of them? Do we like what should be in the email notification? What do we actually store? What are we actually not storing, but sending? Like, what is the message going to be? Should it have a subject line and a message and like the body of the message and all this stuff? So I mean, maybe we can start with that assumption that is what we need to do, and potentially that we need to store it. But I'm not confident that I care about storing the email notifications in a database. It might just be fine to store it in a log file somewhere. In other words, not the database. It doesn't get stored in the relational database. It gets stored in like a text file. Cool. So let's just go with that. So we'll have the body, body of message here. I guess I'll say message body as a property in here. And I just made this up, by the way. This was not stated in the requirements document. So I just took a noun out of thin air and put it into this notepad document, right? This is because I would have spoken to the business analyst. Since me, Trevor Page, recording this video and doing this process, I am wearing the hat of the developer, and I'm also wearing the hat of the business analyst. So I'm doing both things right now. I'm having a discussion with myself, answering my own questions, and then putting it down. So that's why I was able to put down this message body here. Same with subject line, right? What is an email notification anyway? What is an email? An email is comprised of, who to send it to. So the to address, probably a from address, right? Who's it going to? Who's it coming from? What's the subject line? And what's the body of the message? That's probably what the email notification will have. Okay. So the code review, however, should probably have the actual video recording. But what is the video recording? The video recording is just really a video file that we're going to be sending to the student. So really, this is a bit of a misnomer, if you will. This is a bit of a misleading thing. We actually don't need the video recording. We need the video recording URL. So I'm just going to structure it like this, like that. So really, there's going to be a code review, and this code review is probably going to have the video recording URL. But really, I'm trying to think. We have this one object here with one property, at least I think one property. Could this be jammed into something else? Like, what is a code review? A code review is just something that gets tacked on to an existing assignment. So really, we might even be able to get away with saying code review video URL right here. Maybe that could be a property of the assignment. Because if we create an object and that object just has one property and that one property is just a string, it's just a URL, then why don't we just, make our lives easier and not make a whole separate object for it, just plug it into what we care about, which is it goes along with the assignment. each assignment will have its own code review video URL. It probably won't have more than one. That's a good question. Will the assignments have more than one code review video associated with it? In my use case, again, now I'm asking the BA, I just asked the BA a question. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. BA, business analyst, is it possible that an assignment can have more than one code review video associated with it? Yes or no? So for my purposes, wearing the BA hat, the business analyst hat, my answer to the developer, back to myself, would be, I think we only ever will have one video associated with one assignment. So it's either 0 or 1 is the relationship here. So I don't think there's much value in storing it as a separate object, at least not right now. Okay, cohort is the next one. So a cohort in this assignment, for the scope of this assignment, is the batch of students that we have starting on a specific start date. So when I launch boot camps every month, we pick a start date. You know, when did we start? And you know, the student gets to choose which boot camp cohort they want to start in. So the question is this important for our logic? Is this useful for us to do this? Because really, what is a cohort? Well, a cohort will have a bunch of students inside of it, right? And what are students? Students are actually users, right? So it's a user with student role, specifically, right? That's what a cohort is. Is that useful? Do we need to be able to group these people together in specific cohorts? I mean, it could be helpful from an organizational perspective, but again, I could just argue that for the user class, we could just have cohort, start date, and just make it a date. Oops, did I spell it right? Yeah, cohort start date. Cohort's a weird word. Anyway, do you see what I did there? Again, it only had one property, as far as I know, that would be useful to keep track of. Which is, what user belongs to what cohort, and then the cohort might have like a date, right? But really the cohort and user is another object. This is another class, right? It's up here, user class. So really, the cohort would be related to the user, and then really the only information that we care about is the date. So this being a relationship, this isn't actually anything we're really, something extra that we're storing. All that we care about is the date. So that's why I said, let's just take the date and just cram it into the user. Every user should have a cohort start date. So just cram it in there. There you go. That simplifies our design. It gets rid of the extra objects, okay? And finally, our user account API. Again, this is probably going to be something like a user service, and I'm going to have the same thought process around this whole email notification thing. Again, do we need to store the email notifications? I don't think so, really. This is more going to be a service for sending emails. So I'm probably going to end up calling this service, which implies that we're not storing this information, right? So the same thing happens here. This is kind of like a user service, right? It's kind of what we have here, which, and then it'll have a method that will, have a create account method in here, right? That we can call via a restful call. So yeah, I think that's more or less what we have going for us. And then the next step, which we're not going to do in this video, we'll do it in the next one. The next step is to see what are the relationships between all of these objects. So we have a user object, an assignment object, and two services. What are the relationships between all of these objects, if any? They might not have any relationship, or they might have relationships. And if we have those relationships, then let's outline them and what are they, because that's going to dictate what our database design is actually going to look like. Okay, cool. So hopefully that process that I went through there, and again, the more nouns we had, I would have been doing more of the exact same thing. There wasn't really anything in this video that I have excluded. You pretty much saw it all, right? You saw me take a handful, whatever it was, 15 different nouns and turn it into essentially 1, 2, 3, 4 different objects. 1, 2, 3, 4, or classes. right? So 4 classes. So you saw me turn 15 nouns into 4 classes and a bunch of properties for each of those classes. All right. So yeah, if we had more nouns, it would have been more of the same thing. Hopefully that's of use to you. Again, this is literally how I start projects. As a veteran of, coding for the past 15 years, I do this exact same process every single time I create a new application. I just go through the document, look at the nouns, pull out the nouns, put them in one spot, and then figure out, is this a class or is this a property of a class? Then once we've done that, you figure out where the relationships exist. And that's what we'll do in the next video. We'll talk relationships. So if you enjoyed this video, I do ask you to go below and click the subscribe button. I forgot to say that at the top of this video. If you've made it this far, clearly you're interested in this stuff. Clearly you enjoy this content. So clearly you want to get notified when the next video in this series in the playlist comes out. So please do subscribe to the channel. Obviously give this video a thumbs up because that is what feeds the almighty YouTube algorithm and helps this video get shared with other people just like yourself to give them the support that they need on their coding journey. Let's all help each other out. Hit that like button, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. Take care of yourself. As always, happy learning, and bye for now.